Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I do readings twice a week from various classics. If you subscribe to my free Substack newsletter at ravensview.substack.com, you'll get notified of the next episode and can leave your comments or suggestions, and perhaps also browse my flash fiction writings or musings on the world. I will be reading to you from Very Good Jeeves. It's a collection of short stories written by P.G. Wodehouse in 1930. In it, Jeeves, a very competent valet, and his hapless employer, Bertie Wooster, were characters in dozens of short stories by Wodehouse. They are told from the point of view of Bertie. Last episode, the plan was for Bertie to embarrass his friend Tuppy at a concert by also singing Sonny Boy before his friend did. Perhaps it will work. The Sonny Boys. Although I had steeled myself to the ordeal before me and had set out full of the calm, quiet courage which makes men do desperate deeds with proud set faces, I must admit that there was a moment, just after I entered the Odd Fellows Hall at Birdmunster East and run an eye over the assembled pleasure-seekers, when it needed all the bulldog pluck of the Woosters to keep me from calling it a day and taking a cab back to civilization. The clean, bright entertainment was in full swing when I arrived, and somebody who looked as if he might be the local undertaker was reciting Gunga Din. And the audience, though not actually mocking him in the full technical sense of the term, had a grim look which I didn't like at all. As I scanned the multitude, it seemed to me that they were for the nonce suspending judgment. Did you ever tap on the door of one of those New York speakeasy places and see the grills snap back and a face appear? There is one long, silent moment when its eyes are fixed on yours and all your past life seems to rise up before you. And then you say that you're a friend of Mr. Zinzenheimer, and he told you they would treat you right if you mentioned his name, and the strain relaxes. Well, these costermongers and whelk-stallers appeared to me to be looking just like that face. Start something, they seemed to say, and they would know what to do about it. And I couldn't help feel that my singing Sonny Boy would come, in their opinion, under the head of starting something. "A nice full house, sir," said a voice at my elbow. It was Jeeves, watching the proceedings with an indulgent eye. "You are here, Jeeves?" I said coldly. "Yes, sir. I have been present since the commencement." "Oh," I said. "Any casualties yet?" "Sir." "You know what I mean, Jeeves," I said sternly, "and don't pretend you don't. Anybody got the bird yet?" "Oh, no, sir." "I shall be the first, you think?" "Oh, no, sir. I see no reason to expect such a misfortune. I anticipate that you will be well received." A sudden thought struck at me. "And you think everything will go according to plan?" "Yes, sir." "Well, I don't. I've spotted a flaw in your beastly scheme." "A flaw, sir?" "Yes. Do you suppose for a moment that when Mr. Glossop hears me singing that dashed song, he'll come calmly on a minute after me and sing it too? Use your intelligence, Jeeves. He will perceive the chasm in his path and pause in time. He will back out and refuse to go on at all." "Mr. Glossop will not hear you sing, sir. At my advice, he has stepped across the road to the Jug and Bottle, an establishment immediately opposite the hall, and he intends to remain there until it is time for him to appear on the platform." "Oh," I said. "If I might suggest, sir, there is another house named the Goat and Grapes only a short distance down the street. I think it might be a judicious move." "If I were to put a bit of custom in their way?" "It would ease the nervous strain of waiting, sir." I had not been feeling any too pleased with the man for having let me in for this ghastly binge, but at these words I'm bound to say my austerity softened a trifle. He was undoubtedly right. He had studied the psychology of the individual, if you see what I mean, and it had not led him astray. A quiet 10 minutes at the Goat and Grapes was exactly what my system required. To buzz off there and inhale a couple of swift whiskey and sodas was with Bertie Wooster the work of a moment. The treatment worked like magic. What they had put into the stuff, besides vitriol, I could not have said, but it completely altered my outlook on life. That curious, gulpy feeling passed. I was no longer conscious of the sagging sensation at the knees. The limbs ceased to quiver gently, the tongue became loosened in its socket, and the backbone stiffened. Pausing merely to order and swallow another of the same, I bade the barmaid a cheery good night, nodded affably to one or two fellows in the bar whose faces I liked, and came prancing back to the hall, ready for anything. And shortly afterward, I was on the platform with about 1,000,000 bulging eyes goggling up at me. There was a rummy sort of buzzing in my ears, and then through the buzzing I heard the sound of a piano starting to tinkle, and commending my soul to God, I took a long breath and charged in. Well, it was a close thing. If ever my grandchildren cluster around my knee and want to know what I did in the Great War, I shall say, never mind the Great War. Ask me about the time I sang Sonny Boy at the Oddfellows Hall at Bermondsey East. The whole incident is a bit blurred, but I seem to recollect a kind of murmur as I hit the refrain. I thought at the time it was an attempt on the part of the many-headed to join in the chorus, and at the moment it rather encouraged me. I passed the thing over the larynx with all the vim at my disposal, hit the high note, and off gracefully into the wings. I didn't come on again to take a bow. I just receded and oiled round to where Jeeves awaited me among the standees at the back. "Well, Jeeves," I said, anchoring myself at his side and brushing the honest perspiration from the brow, "they didn't rush the platform." "No, sir." "But you can spread it about that that's the last time I perform outside my bath. My swan song, Jeeves. Anybody who wants to hear me in future must present himself at the bathroom door and shove his ear against the keyhole." I may be wrong, but it seemed to me that toward the end they were hotting up a trifle. The bird was hovering in the air. I could hear the beating of its wings. I did detect a certain restlessness, sir, in the audience. I fancy they had lost their taste for that particular melody. I should have informed you earlier, sir, that the song had already been sung twice before you arrived. What? Yes, sir. Once by a lady and once by a gentleman. It is a very popular song, sir. I gaped at the man. That with this knowledge he could calmly have allowed the young master to step straight into the jaws of death, so to speak, paralyzed me. It seemed to show that the old feudal spirit had passed away altogether. I was about to give him my views on the matter in no uncertain fashion when I was stopped by the spectacle of young Tuppy lurching onto the platform. Young Tuppy had the unmistakable air of a man who had recently been round to the Jug and Bottle. A few cheery cries of welcome, presumably from some of his backgammon-playing pals, who felt that blood was thicker than water, had the effect of causing the genial smile on his face to widen until it nearly met at the back. He was plainly feeling about as good as a man can feel and still remain on his feet. He waved a kindly hand to his supporters and bowed in a regal sort of manner, rather like an Eastern monarch acknowledging the plaudits of the mob. Then the female at the piano struck up the opening bars of Sonny Boy, and Tuppy swelled like a balloon, clasped his hands together, rolled his eyes up to the ceiling in a manner denoting soul, and began. I think the populace was too stunned for the moment to take immediate steps. It may seem incredible, but I give you my word the young Tuppy got right through the verse without so much as a murmur. Then they seemed to pull themselves together. A costermonger roused is a terrible thing. I've never seen the proletariat really stirred before, and I'm bound to say it rather awed me. I mean, it gave you some idea of what it must have been like during the French Revolution. From every corner of the hall there proceeded simultaneously the sort of noise you hear at one of those East End boxing places when the referee disqualifies a popular favorite and makes the quick dash for life. And then they passed beyond mere words and began to introduce the vegetable motif. I don't know why, but somehow I had gotten it into my head that the first thing thrown at Tuppy would be a potato. One gets these fancies. It was, however, as a matter of fact, a banana, and I saw in an instant that the choice had been made by wiser heads than mine. These blokes who have grown up from childhood in the knowledge of how to treat a dramatic entertainment that doesn't please them are aware by a sort of instinct just what is best to do. And the moment I saw that banana splash on Tuppy's shirt front, I realized how infinitely more effective and artistic it was than any potato could have been. Not that the potato school of thought had not also its supporters. As the proceedings wound up, I noticed several intelligent-looking fellows who threw nothing else. The effect on young Tuppy was rather remarkable. His eyes bulged and his hair seemed to stand up, and yet his mouth went on opening and shutting, and you could see that in a dazed, automatic way he was still singing Sonny Boy. Then, coming out of his trance, he began to pull for the shore with some rapidity. The last seen of him, he was beating a tomato to the exit by a short head. Presently the tumult and the shouting died, and I turned to Jeeves. "Painful, Jeeves," I said. "But what would you?" "Yes, sir." "The surgeon's knife, what?" "Precisely, sir." "Well, with this happening beneath her eyes, I think we may definitely consider the Glossa-Bellinger romance off." "Yes, sir." At this point, old Beefy Bingham came out upon the platform. I supposed that he was about to rebuke his flock for the recent expression of feeling, but such was not the case. No doubt he was accustomed by now to the wholesome give and take of these clean, bright entertainments, and had ceased to think it worthwhile to make any comment when there was a certain liveliness. "Ladies and gentlemen," said old Beefy, "the next item on the program was to have been songs by Miss Cora Bellinger, the well-known operatic soprano. I have just received a telephone message from Miss Bellinger saying that her car has broken down. She is, however, on her way here in a cab and will arrive shortly. Meanwhile, our friend Mr. Enoch Simpson will recite the charge of the Light Brigade." I clutched at Jeeves. "Jeeves, you heard?" "Yes, sir." "Well, she wasn't here." "No, sir." "She saw nothing of Tuppy's Waterloo." "No, sir." The whole bally scheme has blown a fuse." "Yes, sir." "Come, Jeeves," I said, and those standing by wondered no doubt what had caused that clean-cut face to grow so pale and set. I have been subjected to a nervous strain unparalleled since the days of the early martyrs. I have lost pounds in weight and permanently injured my entire system. I have gone through an ordeal which will make me wake up screaming in the night for months to come. And all for nothing. Oh, let us go." "If you have no objections, sir, I would like to witness the remainder of the entertainment." "Oh, suit yourself, Jeeves," I said moodily. "Personally, my heart is dead, and I'm going to look in at the Goat and Grapes for another of their cyanide specials, and then at home." It must have been about 10:30, and I was in the old sitting room somberly sucking down a more or less final restorative, when the front doorbell rang, and there in the mat was young Tuppy. He looked like a man who has passed through some great experience and stood face to face with his soul, and he had the beginnings of a black eye. "Oh, hello, Bertie," said young Tuppy. He came in and hovered about the mantelpiece as if he were looking for things to fiddle with and break. "I've just been singing at Beefy Bingham's entertainment," he said after a pause. "You weren't there by any chance?" Oh, no," I said. How did it go?" "Oh, like a breeze," said young Tuppy. "Held them spellbound." "Knocked them out, eh?" "Cold," said young Tuppy. "Not a dry eye." And this, mark you, a man who had had a good upbringing and had, no doubt, spent years at his mother's knee being taught to tell the truth. "I suppose Miss Bellinger is pleased," I said. "Oh, yes, delighted." "So now everything's all right?" "Oh, quite." Tuppy paused. "On the other hand, Bertie." "Yes?" "Well, I've been thinking things over, and somehow I don't believe Miss Bellinger is the mate for me after all." "What?" "No, I don't." "Well, what makes you say that?" "Oh, I don't know. These things sort of flash on you. I respect Miss Bellinger, Bertie. I admire her. Well, I can't help feeling now that a sweet, gentle girl, like your cousin Angela, Bertie, would in fact, well, what I came round for was to ask if you would phone Angela and find how she reacts to the idea of coming out with me tonight to the Berkeley for a bit of supper and a spot of dancing." "Go ahead," I said. "There's the phone." No, I'd rather you asked her, Bertie. What with one thing and another, if you paved the way, you see, there's a chance that she may be, you know how misunderstandings occur, and well, what I'm driving at, Bertie, old man, is I'd rather that you surged around and did a bit of paving, if you don't mind." I went to the phone and called up Angela. "She says come right round," I said. "Tell her," said Tuppy in a devout sort of voice, "that I will be with her in something under a couple of ticks." he had barely biffed away when I heard a click in the keyhole and a soft padding in the passage without. "Jeeves," I called. "Sir," said Jeeves, manifesting himself. "Jeeves, a remarkably rummy thing has happened. Mr. Glossop has just been here. He tells me all is off between him and Miss Bellinger." "Yes, sir." "You don't seem surprised?" "No, sir. I confess I had anticipated some such eventuality." "Eh? What gave you the idea?" "It came to me, sir, when I observed Miss Bellinger strike Mr. Glossop in the eye." "Strike him?" "Yes, sir." "In the eye?" The right eye, sir." I clutched the brow. What on earth made her do that? "I fancy she was a little upset, sir, at the reception accorded her singing." "Great Scott! Don't tell me she got the bird, too?" "Yes, sir." But why? She's got a red-hot voice." "Yes, sir. But I think the audience resented her choice of a song." "Jeeves!" Reason was beginning to a little bit of tottering on its throne. "You aren't going to stand there and tell me that Miss Bellinger sang Sonny Boy, too?" "Yes, sir. And, mistakenly in my opinion, brought a large doll onto the platform to sing it, too. The audience affected to mistake it for a ventriloquist dummy, and there was some little disturbance." "But, Jeeves, what a coincidence!" "Not altogether, sir. I ventured to take the liberty of accosting Miss Bellinger on arrival at the hall, and recalling myself to her recollection, I then said that Mr. Glossop had asked me to request her that as a particular favor to him, the song being a favorite of his, would she sing Sonny Boy. When she found out, after, that you and Mr. Glossop had also sung the song immediately before her, I rather fancy she supposed she had been made the victim of a practical pleasantry by Mr. Glossop." "Will there be anything further, sir?" "No, thank you." "Good night, sir." "Good night, Jeeves," I said reverently. End of chapter. Well, that worked out quite well. Good for Bertie and Tuppy and the poor soprano. I'm sure she will recover. Just a reminder, if you subscribe to my free newsletter at ravensview.substack.com, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. Plus, you can browse the various short stories and musings I have in there. If you enjoyed this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, do leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack, and remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.